If you are a trade or construction business, chances are you've clicked on this video because you are getting leads for your business, but your customer acquisition cost, also known as your CAC, is just simply too high. And what that means is your cost to get new jobs for the business is not sustainable, and you need to find a way to reduce your cost to acquire a customer so that you can become more profitable. Essentially, what you're going to get out of this video is the step-by-step framework that I use for my clients in order to discover where are we spending too much money in the marketing and sales cycle so that we can identify potential issues in the business and so we can actually reduce our customer acquisition cost. And what I'm going to be going through today is the exact framework I do step by step so that you can follow along and identify possible faults in your business that are resulting to you spending too much money to acquire a customer. Why you should even listen to me? Well, not only do I have actual plumbing experience in the trenches, but I have marketing, sales, and operations experience with a company of 30 staff. So I know how to identify potential faults in the business so we can identify them, eliminate them, and reduce our lead costs so we can get more leads for a better price and higher conversion rates. So overall, more net profit in your back pocket. So how to close more jobs for less cost framework. The very first thing we need to look at is our acquisition channels. How are we actually getting leads in the first place? What is our cost? How many leads do we even get per month, per quarter, per year? Doesn't matter. So what you want to do first is identify all the acquisition channels that you have. So all of you will pretty much have word of mouth. Let's say you're running some Google ads. Let's say you're doing a little bit of SEO. Let's say you're even paying for high pages. There are alternative services like Thumbtack or Home Advisor if you're in the States. So those are basically the same service where they provide the leads for you with homeowners inquiry and they just pass on the leads for a fee. Once we've identified our actual acquisition channels, what number of leads are we even getting for each one? Remember, you got to keep this separate. We can do a broad overview of everything, but I want to know what is the actual number of leads, and most importantly, what is the cost? How much did we spend, and then how many leads did we get? And if you divide the two, you'll quite simply find what is your average cost per lead. So for example, let's say now word of mouth obviously doesn't cost you anything. However, it does take time. So this is something you have to strongly consider, that sure, it might not cost you anything, but it will certainly take up more time to get more word of mouth inquiries. But let's just say for Google ads, for example, we'll just go here. Let's just say you spend 10 grand and let's just say you got 100 leads. Quite simply, if you spend 10 grand and you got 100 leads, that means your cost per lead, so CPL, is $100. So every $100 you spend, that is how much you require to actually get an inquiry. That's for that example. SEO, you can either do it yourself if you know what you're doing, but chances are you've actually hired an agency of some sort to do SEO for you. If you've done that, it's probably going to cost you anywhere between $2,000 to $10,000 depending on how good they are. So that is a fixed cost, and the number of leads you get should increase over time. So your cost per lead from SEO specifically should go down, and you should get good leads as well. High pages, they typically charge you per lead, and that cost typically doesn't go down. So you have to really strongly consider what did you actually spend on high pages for the month, how many leads did you get, but more importantly, how much did you actually close? And we'll get to that in a second. Next, once you've discovered how many leads you got for each individual channel and what the cost was, and you have your cost per lead, now we go to the discovery. So once you actually call this lead and find out if they're any worth your time. When you're in discovery and you call them, you're either going to have people that are unqualified or they're going to be qualified. No two ways about it. So you need to figure out what the percentage of them was unqualified and what percentage was qualified. And now if they are qualified, you can send them to a referral program so you can try recoup some of your costs. That can be as simple as just offering them a food voucher, petrol voucher, doesn't matter, but you should absolutely have a referral program of some kind. Now, with qualified and unqualified, you want to do this for each individual client acquisition model because you will get different answers for each one. But let's just say for argument's sake, we're just going to include all of them in this site. So here, percentage unqualified, let's just do 50-50, just for ease of math. Next, once we have the qualified people, there's going to be a percentage of them that do not book, and there's going to be a percentage that do book, depending on, obviously, circumstances. So, for argument's sake, let's just say we do 50-50 again, just to make the math easier. And let's just say, for the start, we got 100 leads total, and let's just say we spent $10,000. Next, what we'd do is once we've gone to the site visit, this is part of our sales process now, as you can see right here, what percentage of them were not quoted and what percentage were quoted. Now here, you should definitely have a high number for this. If you don't have a high number for this, that means somewhere before you went to the site visit, you didn't qualify them properly and you need to work on that step. So let's just say out of this, 90% were quoted and 10% were not quoted. Once we get to the quoting stage, how many of them are confirmed no, so they did not buy, how many of them were ghosted, and how many of them were sold. Now, this is where it gets interesting because you really want to keep a good track of these numbers, because if this number is not high, that means somewhere in the sales process before, something went wrong. Whereas if the number is high, that means everything you did before was actually really good. But let's just say 50% sold, 10% ghosted, and 40% did not go through. Now, once you do the math and you go down each individual stage of the sales cycle, you can very quickly identify where we've got an issue and what we need to address. So for example, right here, if we only sold 50% of everything that we spend time, effort, and energy going to, that means somewhere in either the qualification stage or the site visit stage when we were booking it in, we didn't confirm the intent well enough, knowing that they were actually going to waste our time or whether they were actually going to buy. And by the way, even if you get good or bad leads, it doesn't matter because your sales cycle should prevent anyone that is going to be wasting your time. So for example, in the discovery phase, let's just say only 10% are qualified and 90% are unqualified. That's great. What it means is we have a very good discovery process and we're not letting time wasters through the door. Now, depending on what your cost per lead is on each individual circumstance of these acquisition channels, even if you have a 10% qualification rate, it's not the worst thing if your cost per lead is very cheap. However, if your cost per lead is very high and they're not qualified, then something is very much going wrong in the marketing funnel and how you're even getting these leads, and therefore you need to address that. However, if we go to the discovery and decide 90% were qualified, 10% were not, and then we go further down this client acquisition funnel, and now we've got only 10% sold and 90% not sold, that means somewhere in our qualification process, we failed. And therefore we need to address what we're saying to these customers or what we're promising or what they're expecting. Something there went wrong and something there needs to be addressed rather than the actual quote. However, it could very well be the quote as well. Maybe the quote you're sending doesn't make sense. Maybe it's just full of text and there's no pretty pictures. There's just so many things that could be going wrong. But the whole point of this framework is you figure out all the numbers at each individual stage. And if you're finding an anomaly and something is not quite right, now you know, based on this framework, where exactly things are going wrong. And now you know what needs to be done in order to address it so that you can ideally increase the number of leads, decrease the cost, and make sure that your selling rate is as high as possible for the best price. And essentially, all you have to do to figure out your customer acquisition cost is amount spent divided by closed jobs. So if we spent $10,000 and we have 10 sales out of 100, that means our cost per acquisition, cost per closed job is $1,000. Now, if you're doing bathroom renovations for $30,000, that is a great customer acquisition cost. However, if you're doing plumbing and you're only doing small maintenance, well, you're quite literally losing money in that deal, and it's not a very good one. So you need to address something in the pipeline that has caused this to go wrong, and by using this framework, you can figure out what it is. I hope you found this video helpful on how you can use this framework in order to discover where your customer acquisition costs are going, and therefore you actually have a way to identify how to actually lower it for your business. If you're a trade or construction business and you need some help identifying where in your business things might not be going as well as they should be in terms of customer acquisition costs, you can very well book a team with my team below and would be more than happy to help. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.